right, Power Breakfast continues here on Citizen TV. Thanks for staying with us. Lots of celebrations going on the show, as you can see today. But all this week, we have been observing various international days of awareness. And today, the 13th of October, happens to be World Thrombosis Day. So to help us find out what that is all about, joining me in studio right now is Dr. Mohammed Jailan, who's a director of cardiology at Aga Khan Hospital. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much.
So this is a disease that I don't think too many Kenyans are aware of. We do know that it has to do with blood clots, life-threatening blood clots, but maybe you can explain to us in layman's terms what thrombosis actually is.
Well, probably the best way to understand thrombosis is to understand that the body depends on organs, and all the organs need blood, and the blood is carried to the organs through a circulation system. So the blood circulation is like a road. A thrombus is a blood clot, and the problem with a thrombus or a blood clot is that when the blood clot forms, it can block the road, so it can prevent anything from going to the organ. Many organs are very sensitive to this, particularly the eyes, the brain, the heart, the lungs. So if the blood clot forms and blocks the blood supply to the heart, for instance, you'll suffer a heart attack. If it forms and blocks the blood supply to the lung, you'll suffer something called a pulmonary embolism. And the importance of this is that 1 out of 4 deaths occurring in Kenya and worldwide are associated with the thrombus forming, and basically addressing that is a very important
1 out of 4, you said?
1 out of 4.
Wow, so this is quite common. Is this something that is preventable?
Yes, so there are different types of, I think probably to understand that you need to understand that there are different circulatory systems. There's the arterial circulatory system where the blood is leaving the heart and going to the organs, and then there's a venous circulatory system where the blood is leaving the organs and coming back to the heart. And the blood clot forming in the arterial system is a bit different from a blood clot forming from the venous system, but there are ways of addressing and reducing the chances of you suffering a blood clot in the veins and a blood clot in the arteries. It's preventable, and it's important not only for patients and the general public to know about this, but also for doctors and hospital workers, because if you go into hospital, sometimes you die because something happened in the hospital. Maybe you picked up an infection, or you picked up a virus or a blood clot. And of all hospital acquired deaths, blood clots are the biggest cause. So this is a really serious and important problem. World Thrombosis Day is trying to bring attention to this problem. The Kenya Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis today are holding a big event at the Southern Sun Hotel to try and bring clinicians and practitioners and doctors and also patients together, and we have a couple of celebrities who have suffered thrombosis who are anticipating will be attending that event.
To sort of share their stories and their experience as well. So in terms of who this affects, is there a certain age group, a certain gender? I mean, who should be wary of these types of blood clots happening? So
a blood clot, let's talk about blood clots forming in the veins, just as an example. A blood clot forms usually when there's a little tear, and it's really a good thing. If you have a tear in your skin, the blood clot will prevent you from bleeding to death, and it's a mechanism that mammals, humans in particular, have to protect themselves. Sometimes, if you pour water on the blood clot, it will continue to clot. So one of the things we try and do is encourage movement, so that if, for instance, you're sitting down and in a static environment, like for instance a hospital bed or an aircraft, the circulation of blood in the veins becomes much less, and we encourage movement so that people can continue to circulate the blood back and prevent the blood from sitting and forming a clot in the process.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about aircrafts, because I have heard of people having long flights and having problems with blood clots and such. So what's sort of like the prognosis once someone is diagnosed with thrombosis? How long do they have? I mean, what's sort of the situation after that?
So out of maybe almost 1 million people in the US who suffer a blood clot, 1 out of 10 of them will die within a year. But the blood clot could form in different parts, and how it affects you depends on which organ is being obstructed. The blood clots forming in the lungs are different types. You can have a small clot which goes and blocks off a small part of the lung. You can have a massive clot that blocks the complete blood supply to the lung. The most important thing is to try and recognize some of the symptoms, and maybe if we can focus today on the blood clots that form in the legs and then find their way traveling all the way back up to the right side of the heart and into the lungs, then at least we can impart the message about venous thromboembolism, which is a very important manifestation of blood clots.
Yeah, so what are some of those symptoms?
So for instance, if you develop a blood clot in the leg, there'll be two things. One thing will be that the leg, the blood supply, taking the blood from the leg up to the heart will be reduced, which means that there's traffic, there's congestion of flow. Usually the leg will swell up. Often you'll have some discomfort in the pain in the leg. If you've been in an environment that puts you at risk, if you've been in a hospital bed, if you've been on an economy class aircraft, or indeed any aircraft, but in general the seating in some of the smaller aircrafts really restricts your movements, or if you've been on a long journey, a long bus ride from Nairobi to Kampala for instance, those things would put you at risk. If you're to stand up, that blood clot will suddenly get a little bit of energy, the muscle will push the clot up to the lungs and then put you at risk. So what we advise people to do is keep moving, don't stop, don't stay still for more than 2 or 3 hours. If you're going to do that, there's some leg exercises that you can do. You can flex and relax your ankle in order just to keep the circulation going. The other thing that's very important is to keep yourself well hydrated, keep lots of fluid in your body so that the circulation isn't disrupted because the amount of blood you have is less.
Yeah. So if this is one of the leading causes of death in Kenya and around the world, why do you think it is that we don't know more about this disease?
So thrombosis is a broad term and is covered in different sections by different systems. So if I'm a cardiologist, I'm more interested in the heart, the thrombosis that causes heart attacks, because most heart attacks, almost every heart attack is caused by a thrombus or by a clot. So the thrombosis covered by heart attacks will be discussed in heart attack forums, and you'll be hearing about heart attacks. The thrombosis is caused in strokes, causing the disruption of the blood supply to the brain, will be discussed in stroke forums. So generally speaking, people have been addressing this, but in little areas. But what we're realizing is we need to understand the science and the physiology of the blood clot, and it's actually very helpful to get cardiologists, scientists, stroke specialists, pulmonary embolism specialists together so that we can try and see ways in which the clots that are forming may be different and may also be similar between the various groups.
So tell us a little bit about World Thrombosis Day. How long has this been going on, and what sort of results are you hoping from increasing awareness on this?
So World Thrombosis Day is an annual event. It's organized by the International Society for Thrombosis and Hemostasis. In Kenya, we have just formed the Kenyan Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis. It's a new thing. The inaugural meeting is today, and there's been a lot of concern that thrombosis in itself doesn't get enough publicity. The World Health Assembly decided to tackle by 2025 a certain number of conditions and to reduce those by 25%. And many of those conditions are related to thrombosis, without thrombosis becoming central to the structure. So we're really trying to encourage scientists, the public, to increase the awareness of this problem and to try and encourage people to avoid it. Because even now, and this is my main concern, is even now in hospitals around Kenya, around Africa, around the world, the leading cause of preventable death is thrombosis, and things can be done about this.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about the events that you were talking about happening today here in Kenya to increase awareness.
So the big event is at the Southern Sun Mayfair Hotel. It's a meeting. We have 100 plus clinicians coming together. I'm told, maybe I shouldn't drop any names, but some of our some celebrities who've suffered thrombosis, and I think many of us know who they are, will be attending that event and giving some focus to that. It's being organized by Heart and Life conferences. The Kenyan Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis is hoping to bring clinicians together to make this a focal event, so that on an annual basis we can now look at ways in which we can publicize and increase awareness and action and activity.
So are there resources available for the general public right now to find out more about thrombosis? Somebody watching could, want to get more information. Is there information out there online? I mean, how do we educate ourselves?
So worldthrombosisday.com, for instance, is an easily accessible website, and in that there are lots and lots of resources, and you will understand. So if you've been diagnosed with a blood clot in the legs or a blood clot in the lungs, there are different ways to treat that. Also, if you're working in a clinical environment and you're treating patients, you're operating on them, and they're having operations which involve the abdomen or the pelvis, some patients are particularly high risk, and empowering both the clinician and the patients about ways in which their clinician can prevent this from happening to them, so that you don't go into hospital to have an operation on your stomach, have that performed successfully, and then end up with a blood clot in the lungs which may potentially kill you, is easy. But remember that to try and prevent a blood clot, we need to make the blood easier, more difficult to clot. In other words, we have to give you something that thins the blood. But following an operation, the things that the surgeon wants are for the blood to clot, because he's cut you open and he or she is wants the wound to heal. So there's a balance to be struck, and experience is required, and experience dealing with this and knowing how much of the blood thinner to give you and when is important, and this is an educational experience. What we're planning today is to try and address that.
Well, thank you so much for coming by to Power Breakfast and telling us more about World Thrombosis Day. I'm sure there are many people watching who have been educated now and will continue to be educated as this event becomes more regular and annual. Thank you so much to Dr. Mohammed Jaylan from the Aga Khan Hospital. He is the Director of Cardiology. Like we've been saying here on Power Breakfast, many international days of awareness happening this week. So we have some information about a couple of them. I believe Willis Raburu is standing by on the other side of the studio with more.